Everyone brags about today's billion-pound Galacticos, but Jose's 2012 team destroyed Pep's Barca with pure counter-attacking cruelty. If these two teams played tonight, couldn't Mourinho's side easily beat them 3-0 before halftime? Or does modern talent beat 2012 discipline? Look, when people talk about Jose Mourinho's Real Madrid in 2011-12, the number that usually gets thrown around first is 121 goals in 38 La Liga games, 100 points, 32 wins, 16 away wins, and Cristiano Ronaldo putting away 46 of them like he was playing a completely different sport. Benzema added 21, Higuain had 22, and somehow Madrid finished 9 points clear of Barcelona. Ridiculous numbers. But here's the thing, the 121 goals weren't actually the scary part. It was how quickly they arrived. Because this Real Madrid didn't need to spend 5 minutes passing the ball around just to prove they were in control. They could let Barcelona have possession. They could sit there waiting. And then the second that ball was won, everything changed. One pass, then another, and suddenly the pitch looked enormous. A midfielder wins it. The first vertical pass breaks the first line. Di María is flying down one side. Benzema is drifting into space. Ronaldo is already attacking the gap, and before the opposition have even realized they've lost the ball, Madrid are inside the box. Goal. That was the real weapon, not possession. Transition. And this is why Mourinho's Madrid were so terrifying. Because they could control a match without necessarily controlling the ball, and they could turn one defensive action into an attacking chance in seconds. They won 20 league games by big margins that season, and that tells you something about the mentality of the side, because once Madrid smelled weakness, they didn't slow down, they went for the throat. Barcelona could dominate the ball, Madrid could dominate the scoreboard, and that's a very different kind of control. So when you look back at that 2011-12 side, don't just see Ronaldo scoring 46 goals and assume the entire machine existed to feed one superstar, because Ronaldo was the final explosion, not the entire weapon. The real question is much more interesting. What if the greatest weapon of Mourinho's Real Madrid wasn't Cristiano Ronaldo? But what happened in the 3 seconds after they won the ball? And if you understand that, you start to understand why one player sat at the center of this entire machine. Because if you think this was simply a team built around Cristiano Ronaldo, you're missing the most important player in the entire system. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. Because if you look at Karim Benzema's numbers in 2011-12, you might think he was simply another goal scorer standing next to Cristiano Ronaldo. 21 league goals, more than 30 in all competitions, technically brilliant, physically capable, and good enough to lead the line himself. But that wasn't really Benzema's job. His greatest value was making everyone around him better. And especially Ronaldo. Because Benzema understood something that a lot of elite forwards don't. Sometimes the best thing you can do for the team is give up the moment that would make your own highlight reel. He would drop between the lines, link midfield with attack, drag a center back away from his position, and create that tiny pocket of space behind him. And the moment that defender moved, Ronaldo was already attacking the space he'd left behind. One movement creates another, one sacrifice creates another chance. And suddenly, Ronaldo isn't fighting two defenders anymore. He's running into empty grass. That was the beauty of Mourinho's attack. Benzema didn't need to be the main character. He just needed to make the main character unstoppable. They had options. They had different combinations. They could change the striker, change the movement, change the point of attack, and Mourinho himself knew that having Benzema and Higuain available gave him a problem he actually wanted to have. Too many solutions. Now imagine replacing Benzema with MBAPPÉ. And this is where the comparison gets uncomfortable. MBAPPÉ might be quicker, he might be more explosive in open space, he might even be a more devastating individual goal scorer. But does he make Ronaldo better? No, because Ronaldo doesn't exist in this version of Real Madrid, and that's the point. Benzema wasn't selected simply because he was the most talented forward available. He was selected because his qualities fitted the machine Mourinho was building. He sacrificed numbers, he sacrificed touches, sometimes he even sacrificed glory, and that's what made him priceless. Because Mourinho wasn't building an attack around the best players individually, he was building an attack around the best relationships between them. And Benzema wasn't the only player willing to sacrifice his numbers. Mourinho built an entire attack around the same principle. And this is where Mourinho's Real Madrid gets really interesting. Because when people look back at that 2011-12 side, they usually see Cristiano Ronaldo, they see 46 league goals, they see the celebrations, the counterattacks, the sheer ridiculousness of the numbers. But the more you watch that team, the more you realize something slightly different. The real superstar was space. Because Ronaldo wasn't operating in isolation, he was operating inside a machine designed to manufacture gaps, and every player around him had a job to make those gaps appear at exactly the right moment. Look at the attack. Xabi Alonso has the ball, Ronaldo starts drifting into that left channel, and immediately the fullback has a decision to make. Does he follow Ronaldo, or does he hold his position? Then Benzema drops deeper, and suddenly one of the center-backs is tempted to step forward with him. That creates another pocket. Özil is already looking for it, and on the opposite side, Di María stretches the pitch until the defense feels like it is being pulled apart from both ends. Then Ronaldo accelerates. One pass, two movements, 3 seconds, goal. That was the terrifying bit. The defense was already losing before Ronaldo even touched the ball. And this is why simply looking at Ronaldo's 46 goals misses the bigger picture. Because Mourinho wasn't just giving his best player the ball and hoping he produced something magical. He was creating an environment where Ronaldo could repeatedly attack defenders who were already compromised by the movements around him. Benzema pulled people away. Özil occupied the space between the lines. Di María stretched the width, and Ronaldo attacked the chaos. It was almost mechanical, but there was nothing robotic about it. And that brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions about that Real Madrid side. Chemistry wasn't about everyone being mates, hugging after training, or simply having brilliant players on the same pitch. It was geometry. Every movement created another movement, every run forced a decision, and every decision opened another piece of space. That is what made Mourinho's Real so brutally efficient. And now comes the really uncomfortable comparison, because if MBAPPÉ is supposed to replace the role of Benzema in a modern Real Madrid attack, the question isn't whether MBAPPÉ is the more explosive player. The question is whether he creates the same spaces for everyone else, and that is a completely different test. Right, this is where the argument gets properly interesting. Because forget the usual question of who is the better footballer, forget the Ballon d'Or debates, forget the highlight reels and the ridiculous goal compilations. Because that isn't actually the question Mourinho would care about. The question is much simpler. Who makes the team better? And on pure individual ability, MBAPPÉ has an obvious case: explosive acceleration, devastating pace, 1v1 ability, the threat to run in behind, and that frightening knack of turning half a chance into a goal. But Benzema offered something slightly different, something that doesn't always show up on a stats graphic. He accepted the role. Back in 2011-12, Benzema didn't need every attack designed around him. He could drop into midfield. Link play, drag a center-back away, occupy defenders, combine with Özil, and then suddenly disappear into the box when Ronaldo made his run, and that sacrifice mattered. Because Mourinho also had Gonzalo Higuain, another striker capable of scoring goals, another option, another profile, which meant the system could change depending on the opponent and the game state. Now imagine swapping Benzema for MBAPPÉ. It sounds brilliant, doesn't it? You add more pace, more explosiveness, more individual threat. But Real Madrid don't automatically become better. Because you're not simply replacing one striker with another, you're changing the entire ecosystem around him. You change the spacing, you change the pressing triggers, you change the link-up play, you change the passing lanes for Özil, and most importantly, you change the space available for Ronaldo to attack. That's the bit people miss. A football team isn't FIFA career mode. You can't just take the higher-rated player and expect the chemistry to survive. Benzema understood that sometimes the best contribution was doing something that never appeared on the score sheet, pulling a defender away, making a decoy run, dropping into the right pocket, or simply dragging the opposition's shape 2 meters out of position, and those 2 meters could become a goal. MBAPPÉ might score more, he might beat more defenders, he might produce moments Benzema simply couldn't. But Mourinho's football has never been about collecting the most talented 11 players and telling them to get on with it. It's about forcing 11 individuals to serve one structure. That's why this debate isn't really Mbappé versus Benzema, it's role versus reputation. And that is where things get uncomfortable. Because if Benzema was the glue holding Mourinho's attack together, then Özil was the artist painting the spaces around him. And that is where today's Real Madrid faces another impossible comparison. Now this is a proper football debate because Mesut Özil and Jude Bellingham represent two completely different ideas of what an attacking midfielder should actually be. And if you put them in front of Mourinho, you're not really asking him to choose the better player. You're asking him to choose the weapon he wants for the fight. Özil was the artist. Vision, disguise, timing, the final pass arriving half a second before the defense even realized the space existed. And alongside Ronaldo, Benzema and Di Maria, that made him absolutely lethal. He didn't need to dominate the ball. Sometimes he barely seemed to be involved, and then suddenly he'd receive it between the lines, lift his head, and produce one pass that completely opened the pitch. 4 La Liga goals in 2011-12 doesn't tell you much, because Özil wasn't there to be the main scorer. He was there to create the chances that made everyone else look even better. Now look at Bellingham. Different animal, power, carrying, pressing, arriving late into the box, covering ground, winning duels, and then having the quality to finish the move himself. Özil could unlock a defense with one touch. Bellingham can smash the door down. And that difference becomes fascinating when you put Mourinho in charge. Imagine the manager standing there with both players available. Özil gives you a pass that can destroy an entire defensive line. Bellingham gives you a pressing action that can destroy an entire build-up. One manipulates space, the other attacks it. So if Mourinho had both, who starts? That's the beauty of it. Because there probably isn't one universal answer. If Mourinho wants to slow the game down, draw the opponent forward, and then exploit the space behind them, Özil becomes incredibly tempting. But if the plan is to suffocate the opposition, win second balls, press aggressively, and turn midfield into a physical battle, Bellingham suddenly looks like the obvious choice. And this tells you something fundamental about Mourinho. He doesn't pick the best 11. He picks the best 11 for the problem. That's why comparing Galacticos across different eras can be so misleading, because football isn't played on a spreadsheet, and talent doesn't exist in isolation, it exists inside a structure. And the structure decides which talents become devastating and which ones simply look expensive. And that philosophy explains why the 2012 midfield may actually be the biggest reason today's Galacticos would struggle. And this is where people sometimes get the wrong idea about Mourinho's 2012 midfield. Because when we talk about modern football, we often assume the best midfield has to be pressing every second, sprinting everywhere, hunting in packs, and covering ridiculous amounts of ground. But that wasn't really the secret of Xabi Alonso and Sami Khedira. They didn't need 11 players running around like headless chickens. They needed someone who knew exactly where to stand. Alonso was the controller, the player who could receive under pressure, lift his head, and suddenly change the direction of the entire attack with one pass, while Khedira provided the balance, covering ground, protecting Alonso, and making sure the midfield didn't collapse whenever Ronaldo, Benzema, or Di Maria exploded forward. And then there was Özil, the connector. the man who took Alonso's distribution and turned it into chances. Above them, Ronaldo, Benzema, and Di Maria were waiting to attack space, and behind them, Ramos. Pepe and Arbeloa or Coentrao gave Mourinho the defensive platform to take those risks. It was a remarkably clear structure. And the numbers tell you something important. Because this wasn't simply a team built for flashy counter-attacking highlights. Real Madrid won 32 league matches that season, took 16 victories away from home, and finished with 100 points, eventually winning La Liga 9 points clear of Barcelona. That requires consistency, that requires control, because you don't win a 38-game title race by playing chaos football every weekend. There had to be another gear. And you can almost see it happening. Alonso receives the ball, one touch, head up. A vertical pass through the lines. Khedira holds his position. Ronaldo starts running. Benzema drifts across. Di Maria attacks the opposite channel. Suddenly, the opponent has 5 seconds to solve a problem they didn't even know existed. That wasn't chaos. That was organized violence. And that's the fascinating thing about Alonso. He didn't need to run around trying to prove he was involved in every moment of the game, because his influence came from deciding where the game would be played, when it would accelerate, and, just as importantly, when it would slow down and suffocate. Mourinho didn't need a midfield full of superheroes. He needed players who understood the geometry of the team. And now we reach the uncomfortable part. Would that system actually survive against football in 2026? Now, before anyone starts shouting that this is just another football was better back then argument, it isn't, because modern football has changed massively. The 2026 game is faster, more tactical, and far more obsessed with what happens when you lose the ball. Pressing structures are more sophisticated. Rest defense has become almost as important as the attack itself. Fullbacks are stepping into midfield. Build-up shapes are constantly rotating, and players are being asked to understand 3 or 4 positions within the same phase of play. So no, you can't simply take Mourinho's 2012 Real Madrid, drop them into a Champions League night in 2026, and assume they'd walk onto the pitch and win. They wouldn't. Mourinho would have to adapt, and that matters. Because Real Madrid's 121 goals and 100-point season were produced inside a completely different tactical environment. And while that side was brutally effective, modern football would test different weaknesses and demand different solutions. Now put the two teams side by side. 2012, Ronaldo, Özil, Di Maria, Alonso, Khedira, Ramos, Pepe, Casillas, a team built around spacing, transition speed, physical balance, and ruthless movement. Now 2026, Vinicius, Bellingham, Valverde, Trent, Cucurella, Courtois, different profiles, different physical demands, different tactical problems. And on paper, 2026 might have the better individual footballers. Pause. But football has never been played on paper. That's the whole point. Because you could give Mourinho 11 superstars and still end up with a dysfunctional team, while another side with slightly less individual brilliance can become terrifying if every player understands exactly what the man next to him is supposed to do. And that was the secret of 2012. It wasn't that Ronaldo was better than MBAPPÉ, or that Özil was better than Bellingham, or that Alonso would somehow dominate every modern midfielder. It's that Mourinho had created a structure where the stars understood when to sacrifice themselves. Ronaldo didn't have to do everything. Benzema didn't need to score every week. Di Maria could run himself into the ground. Khedira could disappear from the headlines while doing the dirty work, and Alonso could control the game without looking spectacular. That's what makes the comparison so fascinating. Modern football has more tactical sophistication, but tactical sophistication doesn't automatically create chemistry. And this is where Mourinho's greatest challenge begins, because the real difference between these two teams isn't Ronaldo versus MBAPPÉ. It is what happens when the manager tells 11 superstars, sacrifice your game for someone else's. So, we finally come back to the question we started with. Would Mourinho's 2012 Real Madrid destroy today's Galacticos? Honestly, maybe not, and that's the point. Football has evolved too much for a simple old school was better cliché. Modern pressing is different. Build-up mechanics are different. The sheer tactical complexity in 2026 would force Jose to adapt plenty of what worked in 2012. So no, I won't sit here and tell you Ronaldo, Benzema and Özil would just automatically smash MBAPPÉ, Vinicius and Bellingham. That would be lazy analysis. But here is where it gets terrifying. What if the biggest difference isn't the talent on the pitch, but the man on the touchline? In 2012, roles were brutally clear. There was a hierarchy. There was sacrifice. There was one machine. Fast forward to today's Galacticos. MBAPPÉ can be the superstar. Vinicius can be the superstar. Bellingham can be the superstar. But when everyone is the main character, who plays the supporting role? More options don't always mean the better team. Sometimes it just means more chaos. Mourinho didn't build a side where everyone played their best individual football. He built a side where every piece made the next one lethal. The 2012 team didn't destroy Europe because they were individually superior. They destroyed Europe because they knew exactly what the team needed from them. And that absolute clarity, that's the one thing £1 billion still can't buy.